All right, we're going to get started with the Empowering Modern Inclusion Done Right session. We have a very, very special speaker, Alycia Anderson, who you can see on the screen. Um, and Alycia, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for the invitation to be here. I'm thrilled. I wish I was there in person, but virtual is second best option. I am Alycia Anderson. I am a globally recognized motivational speaker, a disability advocate, workplace advocate. I'm an adaptive product consultant. I'm the CEO of the Alycia Anderson Company. I have been a wheelchair user since birth, so lifelong. And so the work that I do isn't just who I am, it's part of every single lived experience that I've had. I serve on the California Insurance Diversity Task Force. I host a podcast called Pushing Forward with Alycia, if anybody's looking for disability forward content and a podcast. And I tell this beautiful stories of diversity and disability and the power in our path, really around the world. I previously worked in corporate America for about 20 years in startup technology. And that's really where I kind of found the opportunity to start to advocate for workplace inclusion when I ran into inaccessibility and opportunities there. I've got a master's degree in disability sports science. I worked for the Paralympics for a while, creating educational manuals that were delivered globally to teach our youth about Paralympic sport and inclusion. And I have the privilege of working for unbelievable brands with my business from Microsoft, Victoria's Secret, Etsy, Netflix. I travel all around the world. And my mission is really simple. It's to reframe how the world, the workplace sees and understands and shows up for disability inclusion and shifting the perspective from limitation to asset. And so, yeah, I try to right size everyday obstacles for all of us. And that's me.
We're so excited to have you, Alycia. So I'm just kind of curious, like to kick it off, what sparked your drive and passion in the space, really? And I'm sure it was from your own experience, right?
Yeah, I mean, from the time I was young, which I'm sure a lot of us in the room have this experience, I there was barriers everywhere to kind of overcome, whether it was schools, lack of ramps, segregated classrooms, inaccessible playgrounds that translated all the way into work. And I just knew what it felt like to be underestimated my entire life. And I saw the opportunity to turn that underestimation that was being put on me and shift that into potential and open up some of the doors that were automatically closed for me just by my mere existence. And so through my life, this theme of advocacy has always been there for me to kind of reach the dreams that I wanted and have the goals and achieve the things that I wanted. And so I was sort of the first generation of kids growing up with disabilities after legislation was passed. And I was kind of like that first generation access kid. And there was just a lot of no's in my path. And so I've had to find my voice and use my voice to literally create the opportunities that I wanted for myself, not what society said that I could do or what I sort of fit in. And along the way, I've been able to create a platform that's called the Heart of Inclusion, and sort of break down some of those barriers through storytelling and education and so it's been kind of a lifelong journey, I'm sure for most of us, to number one, accept my own disability, which took a really long time, but then find a voice to literally advocate for the things that I wanted to do. And once I started to do that, there was literally magic waiting for me on the other side.
I'm curious what your answer is. This next question here. What does the term accessibility, what do you think that means globally to you?
For me, it means freedom. I mean, accessibility is everything. It's not just ramps or captions, it's equity. It's access to education, to employment, to love, to friendship, to adventure, to really anything in life. And it's being able to show up in every single space that we choose without having to fight for permission. Globally, I think accessibility is about building systems and structures and policies and laws and technologies and cultures that will work for all of us. But no matter what our abilities are, it's having that path and that freedom to navigate. And accessibility is when we're designing schools where every learner is welcome, where workplaces value every like person and their talents and the things that they bring. It's where transportation will move all of us without us having to fight for it or give up our independence for it. It's when digital spaces are connected equally, and all abilities can use any type of technology. And the key, I think, with accessibility is it really isn't a luxury. It's actually our human right, and it's something that we need to really fight for and use our voices to advocate for. And it's not necessarily about helping people with disabilities, but it's about creating a world where everyone, all of us, can participate, contribute to our fullest, and feel that like sense of belonging without having to fight through barriers to find a place of belonging.
Yeah, and I feel like you're so right, especially when we talk about the ADA. I think a lot of people don't realize that the ADA is supposed to be the bare minimum and that the ADA really only applies to public spaces. And so most private spaces are very inaccessible. So completely agree with you there. Um, through your work and your experiences, and I feel like we say this a lot as disability affected individuals ourselves, like just like living period, like like doing our daily lives, doing the daily living things, like running an errand in a way is defying the odds and making a statement in and of itself. And so I'm curious, how do you think you've defied the odds and navigated ableism? Because I'm sure we all have experienced it at least once in our life.
I mean, I think we all experience it every day, and I think
Yeah, it's
how
pretty.
we navigate it, for me, it's changed over time. When I was younger, I didn't even know what it was. I didn't know that it existed, though it was the most active participant in my life, really throughout my entire life. And then once you know what it is, for me, like I put up this wall and like completely rejected any theme that had to do with ableism or lived experiences that might suggest that I might not be able to accomplish what I want to accomplish because it took away my abilities. But as I've become an advocate and become stronger in my voice, which by the way, literally took me until I was in my 40s, like this is not an easy process of self-acceptance and vice versa, like figuring out how to find your spot in the world without having to explain. But to answer the question, like I think for me, ultimately now it's refusing to play small. It's facing obstacles head on. Ableism, it shows up in all of these places, classrooms, workplaces, even it shows up in the quiet places in our own minds. And so it can be really, really subtle, it can be blatant, and it's either way pretty exhausting. And I've learned through the challenges that ableism has presented in my life, whether it's, not being invited to a team building event or not being hired for a job or just feeling out of place. When I started to speak up in spaces that I was really uncomfortable to do so, breaking that silence really empowered me in my own space to not only accept who I am, but also like try to educate a little bit. And education is not it's not our job to do. It's not something that we're required. But I did find the more that I start to speak up and challenge some of these typical norms that are placed on our abilities, people start to understand, and the things that we don't talk about, the things that they don't learn, the things that they haven't been exposed to. And so for me, I now, I roll onto stages and I have these tough conversations in front of these global companies, and I want them to lean into some of these things and share some of these uncomfortable truths of what our reality is of our lived experience and theirs and the common ground in it. And it's about kind of turning off, dismantling the old tired theme of disability only sitting in a limiting position, and kind of showing up with our voices and our power to really share the beauty and the depth of who we all are. So, but it's an ongoing thing for me. It changes. It's very seasonal for me on how I challenge myself to either lean into some of the ableism and the tough stuff. And sometimes I'm tired and I just don't feel like doing it, and I'll let it just be. And that's okay too. So ebbs and flows.
Totally get that for sure.
Yeah.
We touched a little bit about this with the ADA, how that's just about checking a box. And can you speak a little bit about how disability inclusion is meeting us outside the box?
Yeah, I mean, we're trying to get outside of the box with disability inclusion too, because the fact of the matter is many companies and organizations, schools, policies, all of that, it still is somewhat of a check off the box, but it's actually not, right? Like we know that. It's not about saying, oh, I hired that one person with a disability, we're good, we can move on. It shouldn't be a performative thing. It's so much more than that. And disability really does live, to your point, outside of the box. And it's about for organizations and education to reimagine environments and systems and cultures and beliefs, so that everybody can like find that sense of belonging to show up with every layer of our identities. And it's about moving from compliance, ADA, like you said in the beginning, and looking beyond it and getting creative and asking bold questions like, what have we not thought of yet? Or who hasn't been invited into the room yet? And how can we design spaces or technology or our attitudes to consider people that we haven't before? And my platform is called the Heart of Inclusion because this whole idea of policy and checklists is important to a certain extent, but what I have found in my path is that we miss the human value, we miss the stories, we miss humanity, we miss that common connectiveness of coming together as humans. And true inclusion, in my opinion, happens when we look beyond what's required and we do what is necessary and needed and what's right for all of us. And so that means for me showing up in rooms today that still aren't ready for me. And sometimes I have to be brave, and because I've wanted to go after, for me, every job that I've had from an inclusive standpoint, it's been the one you would not hire the girl in the wheelchair for. Like my first job was waitress in a wheelchair. It was back in the 90s because I'm old. But this went viral. Like I could carry 15 margaritas around on my lap. Like I could navigate through tables. I got the best tips. I put myself through college with that job, and stories about it went around the world in newspapers. So viral back then was newspapers, no million likes for me. But people want to see and believe in the things that they're told that is not possible. And that's what our community represents, is sharing with the world, shifting the impossibilities of yesterday into the absolutely possibles of tomorrow. And so like each time I have the opportunity to go and do the job that I choose, and hopefully I can find employers that are willing to collaborate, because true inclusion really is collaboration. Employer being willing to try to think outside of the box and hire somebody that they typically probably wouldn't have, the waitress in the wheelchair. But then on the flip side of it, like I have to show up too. And we have to collaborate on these things together to find new paths and creative ways to find paths forward to inclusion. And once you do that, and once you get really good at it, once you practice it, the sky's the limit. Like in my career, I made it all the way to vice president of sales in technology companies as a woman with a disability, before I started my business. And there's nobody in my industry for 20 years that looked like me. I never ran into any wheelchair user ever. So, I hope that answered the question. True inclusion is collaborative, and we have to work on those things together.
No, for sure. And I love that. And you speak to a lot of major companies every single day around the world. And so I'm curious, like, how do you spearhead and create those long overdue conversations that enact real, true change? And how do you feel like you hold those meaningful dialogues?
I mean, one of the secrets to my success, honestly, is storytelling and relationship building. Education is absolutely embedded in everything that I do, but I have found that through storytelling and finding connective lived experiences, finding empathy, of understanding other paths, creating friendships and relationships that are trusted, building those have been really, really powerful tools for me to then be able to go into some of these organizations and help them reframe policy and training sessions and create safe places for their employees to come to work. Because when we know somebody, when we get to like build real solid relationships, where disarming anybody that might get defensive or feel unsafe or find a place, remove fear, or partly remove fear of this conversation. And once you remove all of that, like stuff that most of people are afraid of, like saying the word disability, or I'm afraid I'm going to offend you, then they're willing to like hold the mirror up in front of their face and like look at the realities and like look internally and say, how do I feel about this? How can I do better? What do I need to learn? And how does this affect me? And how does this translate in my life or my business? And how does it also benefit, the business or my life, instead of it being this limitation? So for me, a real strategy has been building relationships. Like I titled my platform The Heart of Inclusion because I have an identical twin sister, able-bodied, and we grew up chasing after the other half of, I would chase after the able-bodied half of me, and she would chase after the disabled half of her. And because we have this relationship, we would never leave anybody behind. And so I've taken kind of those simple theories of childhood, of caring about somebody, and put that into my platform. And it's translated honestly around the world, this Heart of Inclusion platform. It's been quite remarkable. So I've always thought that the humanity piece of this conversation is missing. It's the last to catch on because we're so stuck on compliance, check off the box, everything's good. Okay, laws are set, policies are there. But we're missing the human value. So did I answer that question? I'm glad. I'm not sorry.
I'd say you pretty much just answered my next question. Maybe you
Oh,
could
shoot.
go to this. What do you feel limits the world from achieving disability inclusion?
the limits in the world are, I mean, there's a lot of limits, right? There's a lot of barriers, infrastructure, policy, laws, all of that. But again, like from a societal standpoint, I think we need to really adjust social attitudes, assumptions, fear that is around our mere existence. We've grown up in this world where that's taught us that disability needs to be silent, that we need to be on the sidelines, that it needs to be fixed, that it's something that we can't embrace until we are in this like perfectly able-bodied lived experience, which is just a false reality. Like that's just not ever going to be. And so I think from a social standpoint, we need to understand disability more than anything. And until we do that, like it affects who we're going to hire, who's going to be our like partner in life, who will fall in love with us, how we design places, because we're not being thoughtful enough of the like social environmental piece of us just like communing together. I think another barrier is lack of representation, and I'm sure all of you are talking about that in this conference today because it comes up a lot, but you know, shifting the inspirational or charity case into empowerment and what our lived experience brings to the world. And we need to be seeing that in the media, the representation of what our like full scope of our lives are. And with all of that comes the lack of education. So I think those three are the three main challenges that are pretty big barriers that need to be faced.
And I feel like access is often an afterthought
Yeah.
or even worse, a burden. So I'm curious, like how do you feel like your work has been received? You know, how has disability include like in the disability inclusion space, how do you think it's been received by the corporate world and the major companies that you talk to daily?
Yeah, I mean, I started my business about 5 years ago, and when I started my business, you know, a lot of these inclusion initiatives were being launched everywhere. Disability was non-existent, like just completely just non-existent. Like I would start to have conversations with these companies, and they didn't even understand the concept of disability and accessibility being part of these culture experiences in the workplace. So I think, you know, over the last few years, there has been an evolution, but out of like the 90% of companies that have some type of culture program within their organizations, only 4 to 9% included disability. So we have a long way to go. But there's been growth. And when I roll into these companies, we're not just talking about like policies and compliance again with that checklist, but it's bringing in that lived experience to share real stories. And that is what has shifted these conversation. And it's been transformative. Like I get hired by these companies, I come on these big stages, and when I leave, their teams are self-IDing, they're raising their hand, they're understanding that disability is them. They come up and they go, wow, I didn't even realize, but I have a disability. Or, you know, I spoke at Southwest Airlines this year, which was a pretty big event. And I had a woman afterwards walk up to me and she said that she has an invisible disability. She's blind in one eye. And one of her bosses would always look at her on the Zoom and say, you never looked me in the eye. And she never wanted to say that she had a disability. But when she left this event, she felt empowered to lift up her disability as an asset in the workplace rather than a limitation. And that is where companies are starting to shift. Not all companies, but there's companies like Microsoft and Apple and companies that layer accessibility and disability inclusion in the fabric of their organization and have different training models for different departments, and it's ongoing, and there's a return on investment from a financial standpoint, from a hiring standpoint, from employee culture. There's a lot of value. And companies are starting to see that, but we have a very, very, very long way to go.
So looking right now at the present and into the future, what do you see accessibility like in the future, and where could we be? Where do you want to be? What do you see that as your projections?
Yeah, I think overall, if we were going to be really honest, right now, accessibility outside of the companies like Microsoft are the ones that are embedding these initiatives as like a philosophy. Accessibility still seems pretty reactive. And so as we identify these barrier points, they're scrambling to fix. It's this afterthought. And that has been pretty historically the issue. Like I started doing this because when I was in my corporate job, it wasn't thought of to make conferences accessible or team building accessible or hiring accessible. You know, when I would go to different team building events, it's like there's stairs not thought of, will carry you. You know, I'm like, I don't want to be carried at work. And, you know, so there's just so many like afterthought trying to catch up. It was really frustrating as an employee. And so for me, like, I think it's time for us to shift from that check off the box mindset to universal design and creating spaces and systems that think of everybody and implement technology and workplaces that are designed universally and culturally to include all abilities. And but we again, there's a long way to go there because there's a mindset, there's this, we're taught from a very, very young age that disability is a limitation, that we will not be able to perform the same way. And that's true. We probably won't be able to perform exactly the same way, but with accessibility and adaptions, we can oftentimes perform even better. I want to share a story. Like when I started my corporate job, the last job that I had before I started my business, I was vice president of sales for a software technology company, startup. We took the startup from startup, sold for hundreds of millions of dollars, had this amazing job. And my boss, I used to hide my wheelchair when I would go on job interviews. I would hide my wheelchair on LinkedIn because I was afraid that it would count me out because I was always going after the physical jobs, the ones that required travel and such. And I went to this job interview. He didn't flinch about my wheelchair. He hired me for an executive role, big title, and I was in a leadership role around boardroom tables and giving the representation that we deserve. And then I started speaking and I asked my boss, why'd you hire me? And he said that he knew that I had to be a strategic planner, that he knows that for me to do the same job, I've got an accessibility plan some more. And he knew that that would translate to my work. And he looked at my disability not only as a part of who I am, but it made me qualified over. And that's where I want to take accessibility and inclusion in the workplace today, where we are taking our disabilities and using them as a leverage point, as a strategy to be bold and say, this is why I'm qualified over other people because of this and that and this. And that's the power of this. And that's where I want these conversations to go. And we're getting there, but we have a long way to go.
Preach all the way. But we'll now move into audience Q&A.
Okay.
I mean, Alycia, do you have anything else to say before we move to audience Q&A?
Any closing remarks?
Yeah, I mean, number one, like I am an open book. So if there's anybody out there that wants to connect with me, please find me on social media, Alycia Speaking, LinkedIn, all of that. I've got the podcast Pushing Forward with Alycia, always looking for guests and new conversations to have. So check that out. And what I really want to say to the room is, anything really is possible for us. It might look different. But the very second that I stopped trying to mask my disability, fit in a box that I would never fit in, hide the stuff that I was hiding, there's always going to be certain things that I keep for myself. Obviously, disability is complex and some of it is very personal, and that's totally up to each of us to share. But I never went into work and said, I have this thing. I need this extra time. And I would stress about being in the bathroom longer or doing things that would take me longer, or not being able to have accessibility. And I would have so much anxiety. And the second that I started to accept my own disability, know that this is who I am, and not be afraid to advocate for the things that I need, and started to leverage my disability as an asset rather than accept the societal ableistic norm that it's a limitation. Once I started doing that and I pushed through the adversity that I was afraid of, because it does require you to be a little bit brave sometimes and take on things that you're not sure that you're going to succeed in. And sometimes you do, and sometimes you don't. That like path forward to pushing through those things, there was literally magic waiting for me on the other side. My life, I am living my dreams, but it took me like really leaning into who I am and using it as this leverage asset tool, and the sky opened up for me. So that's not easy to do. Again, like I said, like it took me a very, very long time. But our disabilities are powerful and they open doors for us that we could never even think of or dream of. So hopefully that motivates somebody.
Yeah, for sure. All right, we'll go ahead and open up for some audience Q&A. What questions do we have for Alycia?
Don't be shy. It always takes one.
Anything? I'm kind of curious, like from the people in the room, like what do you want to see from like a truly accessible world? Like think about it, like how, you know,
It's a good question.
it's hard to think about it because it feels so out of reach.
Like,
The mic. Yeah. The only way she can hear you is through the mic.
Is it on?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay. So
Hi.
I'm a parent of a
What is your name?
April.
Ava?
April.
April. Hi, April. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. I love hearing you say that disability is an asset.
Mhm.
My question is, what's the best way to like start training our minds to really think that way and embrace it? And like where would you have me start as a mom, but then also for my son?
Yeah. First of all, shout out to all the mamas out there. Like I am foundationally who I am because of my mom for sure. When I was born, they did not know when one of the twins was going to have a pretty significant disability. And my mom fought for me for a long time. She actually passed away when I was 7, but she laid down some real foundational advocacy. And so number one, all the advocacy that you do for your child, and I'm so sorry, I can't even see. What is your child's name?
Asher.
He's actually right next to her, Alycia.
I know, I'm trying to like, forgive me, I can't see. Asher, hi Asher. Is it Asher?
Asher, you want to say hi? Hi.
What a name, Asher. I love that. Wow, that sounds like a name that needs to be on stages. So what can you do? You keep using your voice and advocating for anything and everything that he wants. and needs and requires. And as you're doing that, he's learning how to use his own voice. I learned a lot from my parents doing that before I was ever brave enough to ever consider even doing it at all. You push him to navigate things that you might not think he can do. You know, you let him struggle. My parents let me struggle a little bit. And it helped me really create foundational tools of navigating a world that was not ready for me and probably never will be fully. You look at you find your wins, you know. I'm sure Asher has so many talent. Asher, what are you talented in? What are your favorite things to do? What are you good at? Am I putting him on the spot?
Tell Alycia about your gaming. We were just talking about that.
He does do some animation.
Ooh,
He's not a fan of this scenario here.
are you okay, so it sounds like I'm a talker, so I'll take it back. It sounds like you're good at animation and computers and gaming and all of those things.
Minecraft,
He's
I
also
hear.
very creative, like
Creative.
with fantasy kind of stories, D&D sort of story things. So he actually said to me, I don't think there's anything that I want to do that I can't do because I want to do digital things.
I mean, digital things are one of the most powerful things that we can use and build as disabled people. And some of the most powerful tools that we use as a society were built for accessibility, like things like texting and Siri and closed captions. And that comes from minds like yours, Asher, where you're really good at technology and you're thinking about tools. And as you're learning technology, you can start to think about things that would be even better or easier for you to use them, and start to think about how to build them and how to design them and how to get creative. And it's our minds and our talents of navigating these worlds and these technologies that weren't built for us, that are not accessible, that we find new innovations and new creative things to build and give to the world that would never ever be thought of if it wasn't thought of by a disabled person, because we have to get creative to be included. And that means adapting sometimes on the fly. Not everything's going to be perfect for us all the time. We have to be willing to sometimes just adapt if we want to exist and be included, right, wrong, or indifferent. And as we're navigating those things, we find what we can give back to the world. And that is how you find your space. You know, like for me, I always knew that one of my talents was to use my voice loudly. I didn't know what that was going to be. I didn't know where I was going to end up, but I always felt like that was the thing that would translate to something, you know, and it did. So how old is Asher?
14.
Oh, 14, a teenager too. Good age. Yeah, you're just there, you know, entering high school, I'm assuming, or in high school, and you're going to start to figure out a lot about yourself right now as you're growing up and like into teenage life. And the best thing that I can say to you is this doesn't come easy. High school was hard. Like accepting your disability, fitting in, like disability is hard when you're younger, but find your friends, find your allies, find the ones that are gonna, you know, be in the room with you and help you and advocate for you. And because one of the biggest things that helped me, and I had an identical twin sister, so she was a built-in best friend, but you know, she finding allies that are going to speak up for you when you're not in the room. And when you are in the room, they're going to create space. They're going to pull out a chair. They're going to make sure your voice is heard. They're going to be there when you're not brave enough to do it. We don't have to do these things alone. We need to find the people around us that love us, that want to support us and want to be in community as we're finding our own confidence, because we're not born with it. Like we need to figure these things out. But every time you challenge yourself to do something that seems a little bit scary or a little bit brave, once you go through that, you're like, oh, okay, I did that. Now what? And that for me, that now what? Okay, I'm going to try something else. I want to be a TEDx speaker, or I want to go play wheelchair tennis, or I want to go speak at a school, or I want to help this little guy learn how to ride a hand cycle, whatever it is. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do it. Try. And once you try, then you go, oh, that wasn't that hard. Maybe you didn't do it fully, maybe you didn't complete the task, but that trying always for me encouraged me to try again. It's easy to go, no, no, no. And I said no a lot of my life. No, no, no. Too hard, too scary, not accessible. No, 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 no. Once I started saying yes, I built more tools in my tool belt. So I don't know if that's helpful. But shout out to moms. Thanks
Any other questions? Go ahead, Alycia. Did I cut you off?
No.
Okay.
Thanks for the question, April. Who's in the room? Like, is it a bunch of parents and
Mostly young adults that are affected. But yeah,
Hi.
I think shout out to mama.
Looks like there's a couple sportos there. I see some sport shirts.
Cough, cough.
What about college? Is anybody thinking about college in the room?
Yeah, we got a hand up.
Yeah.
I'm sure you know, or you're looking into it, but there's a lot of schools with a lot of like collegiate programs now for students with disabilities. And like I ended up getting a full ride scholarship for a master's program that was in Belgium. I said it in the beginning. That was by leveraging my disability in the application. And I did this full ride scholarship it was a global scholarship where 35 students from around the world went and studied disability sports science. And there's a lot of opportunity out there for us too, when you're looking at colleges and schools, if you leverage your disability. So think of it as an asset and look for programs that want to give scholarships and money and opportunities and programming to people like us to learn and specialize in Asher technology, or the sporto person in there. Don't know if you are or not, but like studying disability sports science or whatever it might be. There's a lot of opportunities out there. It's incredible what actually has become over the since I was in college, a lot more. So.
Well, thank you so much, Alycia. I think that wraps it up. Thanks to your expertise in this area. That's so important to keep these conversations alive and growing. Yeah, we thank you.
Thanks for having me.